in Wyoming till I was about 15, and then moved to Belgrade. Played some time in the Army, and then went back to MSU, to college. And then I got out and started a concrete company, and then went drinking with the wrong people, and ended up in the film business. So now I have written this book. A white boy from Montana has written about slavery. How's that happen? In about 2005, my wife, or ex-wife now, got a job in South Carolina, and we moved to South Carolina. And I used to play poker with these older gentlemen there in Spartanburg once in a while. And one of them was very racist. And he said to me, when he was always trying to educate the Yankee. And one time he said to me, do you know, well, he said something about the white man's burden. And he asked me if I knew what that was. And I said, no, I don't. And he was like, oh, you Yankees don't know nothing. So anyway, he explained it to me. And in the South, there's this thought, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, that when the slaves were freed, that they had it so well, they stayed on the plantation, and the plantation owners had to take care of them. So they became a welfare burden, is the idea. Well, I thought about that a lot, and I thought, that's about the craziest, most racist thing I've ever heard. And the truth is, when emancipation happened, they did not want the slaves to leave because they would have no one to work the crops. So they did everything to keep them on the plantation, is the actual truth. They were not lazy bums that hung out so that the plantation owners had to take care of them. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I have written on and off throughout my life, different periods, about different things, and I started jotting things down about it, and writing about it, and reading about it, and blah, blah, blah. And COVID hit, and I had time. So I compiled what I had and put it together. And this is a parable of a man's life. And it starts 6 months after the Civil War was over, 6 months after emancipation. And he looks at where he's at and realizes that he's at least enslaved, or more so than he was before emancipation. And so this is kind of an epiphany of his. And the book, the title of the book is Freed into the Slavery of My Mind. So anyway, that's where the motivation came from it. And anybody have any questions? Okay, I will get started. And I'll try not to blow leaves everywhere. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. Freed into the slavery of my mind. Chapter 1. My life began in the middle. Hey, Windsor. He's standing here drooling at the foot of my bed, staring down at my lifeless feet. I announced to my dead friend. Death is. I can almost feel his greedy, long, bony paws massaging them. I grinned, thoroughly enjoying the chuckle I playfully threw in death's direction. It's as if he's waiting for them to get up and follow him. Ah, Windsor, my mind is strong, but my body has finally failed. I just hope he allows me the time to give the world our story. Whatever hides behind death's hollow hood did not answer. It's important they know, I told death in utter seriousness, because it's imperative to learn to be dangerous like me. Lying there in the deafness of his answer, I relented. But a sip of shine, and I would toast to your indifference, my new friend. Windsor, I asked, when death is done here, maybe you can meet me for a final ride to the other side. Take me to meet my Missy. I scooted up on my elbows, chuckling again, because everywhere we had gone in life, it was side by side. The only day I had ever rode Windsor was on the last day of my slavery. Not the last day my body lived in shackles, but the last day my mind was owned by the white man. Because those two events are very different in time and consequence. My people measured time by the seasons, by the moon, and Sunday services. None of us could count or read, because that was a whipping post offense. We had no measuring stick for how many seasons, moons, or sermons passed. They came and went. I do know it has been 43 years since the events of that one day freed my mind. I was in the middle of my life then, so I must be in my 80s. Right around Christmas, back in 1864, an angry Confederate soldier galloped into the plantation, screaming that the Union Army was just down the road. Our freedom had arrived. We danced and drank and danced and ate and danced until we couldn't shake anymore. We had a big, grand celebration. What we didn't realize was the shedding of our physical bonds came with a whole new system of slavery. I was fortunate because around the middle of that summer, following my plantation's emancipation, a single day arrived that was so violent, in order to survive, my soul had to be shattered. It was a miracle we survived that day, but the greatest miracle came when I learned to live my freedom. The place beyond the grounds of basic education is where freedom thrived for me. It blossomed in a life well spent, learning through teaching. As my dawn comes into focus, voices and laughter of students echo against stony walls and up through my window, high above the courtyard. An expansive world swamps my little room. Cramped bookshelves lined all four walls, floor to ceiling. A desk piled high with books and papers and pens rests between an empty chair and the open window. The outside world enters directly across from my bed. Someone came in and cleaned up. When I fell asleep, my bed had been littered with books, some of my own writing, but mostly not. All had been laying open to favorite marked passages. On my nightstand, next to the cold kerosene lantern, under pen and inkwell, is the tattered old manuscript that marks the start of my journey toward becoming a very dangerous man. The deal I'm trying to make with death isn't for the space to write our story, but time to edit it into sensical form. A slave wrote our story, mine and his, more than 40 years ago. My mother called him Suki, but my owner said his name was David. We are the same man, yet David had to die so that Suki could live. Here within one inseparable man are two distinct lives, each with their own voice, separated by the epiphany of time. He wrote it in the first years of his learning as his letters and numbers squished. Sorry, I'm getting dry here. He wrote it in the first years of learning his letters and numbers, squished into a tiny desk in a small schoolhouse under the tutelage of a 5-year-old white child. Any questions? That's the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2, David. The door banged open. The clerk and the morning card players got quiet. He was grand, head and shoulders rising above the shelving over on the white side of the store. Long dark hair flowed from under a wide blue-brimmed riding hat. Gold shoulder bars glittered on his great blue coat as he glided among the rows. Picking through the food over on the Negro side of the store, I didn't pay him no mind, because white people got upset when a Negro looks at them. I had a pinch of coffee beans, a hard bread roll, and corn pone when I went up to pay. Coming to the counter, Mr. Piper looked at my goods and said, "What you got there, boy?" The card players to the side of him started chuckling. Other than the round pumpkin belly poking out from under his flat chest, he was a skinny little man with long, dirty red hair and bald on top. His pale blue eyes marched all over me without stopping to look. as if they were searching for a corner to stay out of. I could feel his smirking eyeballs nervously chasing me as I dug in my pocket and pulled out my coin. As all the white men had done since the freedom came, and General Fraley started paying for my ironworking, Mr. Piper dug through my money and took what he wanted. He snickered and said, "Ain't much, a few of these little ones will cover it." The card players laughed as if Mr. Piper had told the best joke they ever heard. "How much was it?" A strong, clear voice behind me pressed as the air went silent. "Excuse me?" Mr. Piper questioned as his scrappy eyes squinted and he reached a hand below the pay counter. A firm, calm voice, so powerful it expanded the room, repeated without asking, "How much was it?" The men at the card table pushed their chairs back slowly, glaring at the Union soldier. Mr. Piper answered while holding his hand under the counter. "None of your business, Yankee Doodle." Without the slightest hesitation, the strong voice behind me answered for him. "Looks like 3 or 4 cents to me." As the silence hung, he said, "You took 30 cents from the man." I was suddenly in the middle of a fix where a man was doing right by me, but I didn't care. It wasn't going to be the best thing for a Negro man. "Before that shotgun you have your hand on kills you, I'd let go of it and give this man his money back," the voice instructed. "Why don't you go screw yourself all the way back to Washington?" Mr. Piper answered nervously, glancing toward the card players. After a moment's silence, Mr. Piper started to jerk his hand back from under the counter. The long black barrel of a giant handgun jutted out next to my head, appearing over my shoulder. The big round cylinder of a Navy Colt slowly turned as a long, thick thumb cocked the hammer. The fear in my heart screamed to run, but I froze, as if my feet were nailed to the floor. Mr. Piper glared, his shifty pale eyes pinned on the man behind me. With his free hand, he slowly pushed the coins back across the counter. Glancing at the giant gun beside my head, I stood there staring down at the tiny little silver circles. The expansive voice from behind quietly commanded, "Take them." Staring down at those silver pieces, feeling as if I had paid to betray myself, I slid them into my pocket with a nervous, guilty hand. I obeyed the white voice behind. The servant in me rocked my conscience with guilt, as if I were the one stealing from Mr. Piper. I looked at him, my eyes silently asking for forgiveness. The long barrel slowly pulled back from the side of my head and disappeared. As it slid into its holster, Mr. Piper's eyes, pale, nervous eyes, squinted, and he jerked his hand back from under the counter. The butt end of his shotgun started to peer when that Navy Colt fired in my ear. Ringing and reeling, my whole world stopped as pain pierced my eardrum like a battle sword. Fire erupted before my eyes. Piper's eyes widened as he stumbled back, flopping on piled grain sacks. He wasn't lying so much as sitting up, leaning. His jaw hung, hanging, resting quietly on his chin. A round, seeping red hole right between the eyebrows. Perfect-like, as if someone had done the measuring on him and figured that's where the hole was the best place to go. Staring blankly at me, blood and brains oozed down the white sacks behind. The Union man swung his giant gun toward the men at the card table. He said something, but the voice was so far away down a ringing tunnel, I couldn't understand. Sprinting out the door, shots echoed through the long, dark cave in my mind. Running like when I was a child, without any care as to how far or how long, my lungs burning like the coke in the oven, my legs quivering like a gigged bullfrog, water pouring out of me like the fever. I ran. I ran. I ran. I ran. With heavy, stumbling feet, blackness closed on my mind. The world spiraled through a swirling fog as my ears rang hollow in deafness. They'd be looking for me back at my shack. Instinctively, I had run the other way and found myself at the sign. Standing there shaking and quivering, I thought my long morning shadow had done caught the seizures. The sun was low enough, it hadn't burnt the fog off the stream yet, but sweat soaked clean through my short breeches. Bending over, huffing, I thought I'd never catch another breath, and at the same time, praying I would. The world spinning every which way like it was way off, peeking back at me through a dark cave. After a good bit of talking to the Lord, the world crawled out of that cave, and I stood up as tall as I was, sucking in air. Nothing was coming from down the story yet, so I went to studying the sign as fast as I could, praying it would tell me the way before the white people got crazy mad and came chasing and shooting. In more ways than one, I didn't know where I was going. I never had any place to go. Since the day our owner, General Fraley, told us we were free, I believed I was on my way to Savannah. But the truth is, I had never made it past the sign. The sign was just past the store. The store was just past the drive leading to General Fraley and Miss Carmen's big plantation house. The big house was just past the old slave quarters. The old slave quarters weren't past anything. That was all the going, coming, and past I'd ever known. In the days before we were told we were free to go, merely talking about what might be past the sign had been a sure whipping at the post. Hadn't none of us been allowed to go down so far as the white man's store, much less as far as the sign. It looked like someone had made a bad attempt at making a tree. A tall post sprouted from the ground with boards jutting outward like limbs, only leafless and dead, making no effort to reach toward the sky. Most irritating were the strange scratchings of weathered dark paint on those flat limbs. They meant something, those scratchings did, but not to me. I suppose that's what made it talk, them scratchings. It wasn't like the rising red moon, frogs singing after midnight, a fox hunting during the midday, or a baby crying after sucking the milk. Not a sign like that at all, but something else. This sign talked to you direct, or so Mr. Jemry, or so General Fraley said. He'd say, "Go see what the sign says." Then he'd laugh as I trotted off to listen. In the last months, I had stared at that sign against every kind of sky, but that sign was quiet all the time. I wondered if it was particular who it talked to, so I was patient. Sometimes I'd wait till a folk came along, and I'd stand back as if I was just there standing, and I'd listen good to see what that sign said to them. Them folk never paid no mind to it at all, and went on whatever direction they had their feet set to. When white people came along, I'd lie real quiet, hiding in the grass, thinking maybe that sign only spoke to white people. You know, how white people is to each other. But it never said nothing to them, neither. The white people were different when it came to that sign, though. The white people would stop and look at it as if they were expecting something from it. They'd turn one way, and sometimes the other way, and then go on. But it never said nothing to no white people, neither. They said in Savannah, there'd be lots of people wanting me for my metal workings. General Fraley told me the sign would tell me the way to Savannah. It didn't. Sometimes I'd come right out and ask that sign how to get to Savannah. I'd bring it water. If I saw horse or cow dung on the way, I'd pick it up off the road, spread it up around the trunk. Hard as I tried, despite feeding and watering it, that sign never said nothing. I was fixing to get up the courage to ask the sign which way to Savannah when I heard him coming. I dove in the high grass and hid. Through the ringing, hooves struck the road clear and even, so they weren't in no hurry. Them hooves wasn't chasing nobody. Working my jaw, I lay there trying to pop my ears and listen as they got close. Stopping almost on top of me, I held my breath so hard my eyes throbbed like they were going to gallop right out of my head. I wasn't sure if it was plumb quiet or I was plumb deaf. It was so quiet, I thought maybe they had gone by. But there had been no hooves going away. I hadn't heard a horse prancing like they do when they are reined to a stop. Was I deaf, or were they still out there? I reached out and pushed the grass aside. I froze, because that is what I always done when I saw white people. There he was, the white man who had got me my money back. I slowly stood. I don't understand why. It's best not to let white people know you is around. It's best not to speak. I stood waist deep in reed grasses, staring at him. He was grand, That long, dark blue, clean coat hung well past his saddle, down level with his stirrups. A saber tip peeked out from below that great coat. His right hand moved down in a fist to rest on his hip, edging the coat back and revealing the dark brown handle of that big, long pistol gun. I could still feel that big black barrel pointing across my nose at the white people laughing at me. Turning to level his eyes on me, the day seemed to get as quiet as those card players got some minutes ago. That big black stallion snorted and turned on me like a war horse facing the enemy. I wanted to run from the charge, but for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to cower. He was grand, all right. His eyes and hair were as black as his horse, even darker than me. They seemed to flow together, the pair of them. Their manes waltzed ever so gingerly, together, dancing on morning's breath. Their eyes darting without moving, penetrating like the lead bullet that had spread that shop tender's brows and brains. "You all right?" I heard through the ringing. It came as a command, as grand as the last command he had given. Not a question. He was telling me that I was all right. And suddenly, I was. Trying to round up my best voice, I answered, "Yes, sir, I'd be right fine now, sir." He studied me for a moment. "Where are you going?" Where am I going? It was quite a shock that I would be asked, especially by a white people, where I might be going, at least in a questioning manner rather than accusing. That question had always suggested running, or that I was doing something different than I was supposed to be doing. I stood there, looking one way, then the other way, and then back where I came from. As the summer heat rose with the sun, it dawned on me that I'd been on my way to Savannah since way back around Christmas time. I could see smoke from the store's cookhouse curling above the green forest of pecan trees. The longest journey I'd ever been on was between here and there. I must have been at it a while because he interrupted the answer I was figuring on from all the things I suddenly realized I didn't know. "Are you going somewhere?" he repeated. "Savannah?" came out of my face as if it were trying to get back in. I was more surprised to hear my answer than he. "Savannah." His voice rumbled quietly through the ringing in my ears and down into my soul. Not loud and bossy at all, more like the sound of a distant thunderstorm rumbling so that you can feel its confident power, but you're not being battered or beaten by it. "You have relations there?" He talked funny too. He spoke very clear and pronounced all his words. Although I wasn't sure what them relations were, I understood him. "No, sir." "What's your name?" I gave my papered name, him being white and all. "David." He extended his long arm, reaching and pointing straight ahead, and said, "Well, David, if you're going that direction, then I guess we will not be traveling together." He pointed in the other direction, where the sun rises. "I am riding to the Union camp, this side of Macon." He was the fanciest man I ever saw. He talked like no one I had ever talked to before. He spoke to me like no white people had ever done. And then I had a feeling I never had. I wanted to be like this man. I suddenly wanted to ask him if I could go with him. In reply, I stood there staring up, my jaw as wide as if General Freely were prying it open to prove my age and digestive abilities. He pointed straight ahead and said, "If you are going to Savannah, you better get started because you have a long way to go." He eyed my feet. "Do you plan on walking there on your bare feet?" I didn't hear the last part because he indicated Savannah was straight down the road. I looked at the sign and back at him. I had not caught a thing. Maybe I missed it because of the ringing in my head, or the horse prancing about and breathing heavy, but that just wasn't so. The horse stood still, and they walked here in no particular hurry. After studying the sign a bit more, I got the courage to ask, "Sir, did that sign tell you where Savannah was?" All the while, I walked around the sign, marveling up at it. He had a questioning look when he answered, "Yes, it says Savannah is straight ahead." In amazement, I said, I never heard it say a thing, sir. The grand gentleman stared at me. His firm eyes held mine in a gentle kind of way. Fine hairline wrinkles extended kindly outward from his dark eyes. No, I never heard it say a thing, sir. Not a word. I was looking up and down the sign, stomping around in the dung piled up in its trunk. For lots of moon passes, I've been here. I ain't said nothing. It ain't said nothing to nobody in that time, sir. I understood. He was special. He was a sign talker. It was my luckiest day. Yes, sir, I smiled at him. You're a real sign talker, and I didn't hear nothing. A hard knot yanked down through my heart. There was a sparkle in his eyes that smiled. It was quick. The silent laugh came and went. I balled my fist and clenched my teeth. I didn't care for him no more. He had laughed at me. I wouldn't follow him to heaven or Lord Jesus if he asked me to. No, sir. He rode up close to the sign and reached out, tapping one of the boards with the dark scratchings on it, and said, "This sign says," he hesitated. "The words on the sign say Savannah, 163 miles, and it points in that direction, meaning Savannah is that way." He smiled encouragingly, patient and concerned. Deciding I was too quick on the judgment, I forgave him that time. Nodding, my mind boiling in frothy foam, wondering about them words doing the talking and the miles and the pointing, I finally asked him, "Sir, I listened good, but I didn't hear none of them words." He shifted in his saddle as a smile slowly curled up. That was enough. I was going to poke him right in the nose. If he wasn't a white people, or if he wasn't waist high above me on that horse, or if he didn't have that big pistol gun on his hip. I let the urge to poke him pass. I sure wasn't going to like him no more, though. His knowing smile eased forward into pointy lips. Then he paused for a long draw and gently went on. The sign did not say anything, nor did it make any sounds. These letters make words, and I can read the words which tell. He paused again. They don't tell me. The words allow me to understand where to go by reading them. Then I understood, so I forgave him again. The sign had the same magic that the book General Fraley carried around and made marks in, like the magic book the Mr. Preacher Man teaching about Jesus had. I've heard it described as magic by some people, but reading is not magic. Anyone can learn to read. He paused gently. You can learn to read too, sir, he declared. He read my mind. He called me sir. I suddenly realized this dark, magical stranger was one of them demons riding the roads, tricking Negro folk into following them to hell. He was one of the road demons General Fraley told us about and protected us from. Do you have any shoes? I couldn't answer because my tongue was as stiff as the rest of me. That's what all the sweetening me up was about. He was going to steal me off to Hades and burn me forever and ever, roasting my white bones into frail, fluttering ash. He must have taken my silence as an answer. Savannah is a long way on bare feet. You walk by the Union camp, ask for Sergeant Cross. Tell him Colonel Kettering said he would give you a job, okay? In my terror, I must have nodded because he went on. Good. You could work long enough to earn a solid pair of Union shoes and get some working clothes together before you start for Savannah. I listened to myself thinking, but I'm not sure how because my mouth felt like it was full of swamp mud. This was my first encounter with a genuine live road demon. He was every bit as handsome as the devil, so I was certain he was about to snatch me up on his savage beast and charge laughing into the depths of hell. Head down this way, he said, pointing to where the sun comes from. It's a good long way on foot, 15 miles or so. Frozen stiff, I thanked him again. He smiled and trotted away, calling over his shoulder, Good luck, David. He hadn't snatched me. He called me sir. He told me reading and the words in the letter and the scratchings were not magic. He told me I could do those things too. He rode away. Sign fertilizer squeezed up between my toes as I stood there, and no warmer than I had been before the encounter started. I wasn't demon burnt or nothing. Near as I could tell, my soul was with me. I didn't feel different. I stared up at the sign, at the limb he said had Savannah on it. I wished I was different. That's when I noticed it. The faded dark scratchings on that board was a lot like one of the letterings I'd seen stamped on the axles of General Fraley's Sunday carriage. I turned, looking for the dark blue man, but he was gone. I could hear the clatter of hooves on hard pan, but no man. I had the sudden urge to run after him. Savannah. I saw the letters Savannah, and they looked like letters I'd seen before. I suddenly felt like I could read. My first honest-to-goodness reading. Not like the fake ones I used to impress the young mamas. It was more like matching two pictures together than reading. But I did a couple jigs around the sign, kicked my heels, and nearly let out a holler before I caught myself. I could read, like the dark blue man said. Maybe I had been too harsh on him, thinking he was a road demon and all. So I forgave him. General Fraley said the scratchings were magic. General Fraley said I could leave his forge if the sign would speak to me. General Fraley said the sign would tell me how to go down to Savannah. General Fraley said the road demons would steal my soul and take me off to everlasting hell. General Fraley said I was dizzy and queasy, staring up at the sign. There were no clouds that day. A bright yellow sun slowly bleached the morning sky. The heat of the day rose quickly. I felt faint, but not from the heat. Akin to a cutworm creeping up a vine in the middle of the night, teeth scissoring toward a dangling, fat, ripe red tomato. That is how the thought stalked me down, simply, easily, because my lifeblood was rooted in that vine. Until that moment, I had always believed a cutworm was simply feasting on opportunity. When it got close enough to breathe on the roots of my conscience, to force its gnashing smile against my face, I felt the demon of the road riding the skin of my soul. There was no order. There was only the cutworm, constantly pruning my leaves, steadily strangling my vine, ever starving my will, until I was too weak to be more than a frightened vegetable clinging desperately to my shriveled vine, existing only on the hope that my shriveled vine might not get severed. When that burden settled, it settled like grinding ivory knives to flesh. Staggering in the middle of the road, I suddenly knew the smothering bonds. I lived a slavery worse than iron shackles, because only an ignorant man can be hindered long enough for another to enslave his mind. Although I had been physically free since war's end, the grip enslaving my mind was tighter than ever. I had been freed all right, freed into the slavery of my mind. Chapter 3. Any questions? I'm drying out. I'm as dry as David is. No. Chapter 3. Covered in knobs of curled, scarred flesh, my feet shuffled slowly across yellow, hot, packed clay. The air clung like sweat to my skin, and the dust refused to rise under the scuffle of my feet. They were as thick and knobby on the bottom as on top. I had developed a comfort with the heat, standing over burning coke under the blacksmith's hood most of the day. But the blistering coke fire and me were friends. It was the sun that was bothersome. I wasn't used to the sunshine like the others. The sun felt like it was peeling the skin right off my bones. The fire would only bite when I got too close. That sun, it bit like a blanket of woven chiggers. If I overstoked the fire, it might get too hot and the glowing red coke would pop and kick out orange slag aimed at melting the top of my feet. If I let the fire get too cool, the hot blue coke would crack and leap out, waiting on the floor until I came along to step on it. Then I'd spend the next day keying my mind to staying sharp on the fire. The fire was like General Fraley and the bosses. If I kept a keen eye on them, stayed hard to their business, Most times they wouldn't bite too hard. Except I'd much rather get slagged than whipped. The croppings were tolerable. That wasn't no more than one of them giving me the quirk, raising long welts that oozed like yellow poplar sap. Getting hauled off to the post was a mutilation of mind and body. Misery was being chained the whole day long, burning, waiting for the sun to go down, the work to stop, the crews lined up to witness, the whipping to start, and the not watching of the watchers, sharing the suffering with smothering silence. A lesson for the whipped and the silent. The training was not only for Negroes. I bore the brutal skin scars. We all did. The whipping scars stretched the mind thin. The whip bent us. It was the lies that did the breaking. The road appeared to come together from each side and end at the tree line way ahead. Behind, the road came together like it did ahead, way off, disappearing from where I had come from. My friend the sign had been eaten by the mouth of the road back yonder. It ended behind me, and it ended in front of me. I know I started back yonder, but there wasn't no road back there no more, and there wasn't no road ahead. On one side, the big fields kept going until the world just ended out there all of a sudden. The other side had a row of trees back of the fields that seemed like where I had come from. Maybe where I had grown up and been my whole life. Right there in them trees, among them houses and barns and shops and such. I couldn't see through the forest. A flycatcher circled, eyeballing me like a tasty grasshopper. The smoke rising out of the coke house next to the store where the clerk lay dead was gone. Am I on the way to Savannah or the other way? Or am I on the way Colonel Kettering had rode off to? I suspected, after having the feeling I wanted to be like the dark blue man, that I was following him. Which way had my knobby feet started off to? The epiphany of my life struck my mind with the speed and agility of an arrow, but with the force of a barn timber. The flycatcher was gone, abandoned. The bare sky didn't have no trees to hold it up. For the first time in my life, I was going somewhere. I'd been pondering my feet, the heat, and Mr. Piper's seeping hole. My mind was distracting me from my friend, fear, as it tried to turn me from the direction sucking me along. I didn't know anything or anyone out on the road except the dark blue man, and we didn't go any further back than breakfast. He seemed nice, although he did shoot a man square in the forehead, which I realized had been stealing from me since the freedom came. Money, numbers, and the counting was like the reading the letters in the books. It was a magic only white people could do. One day they told me I was free to do it, just like them. Only the magic didn't come with the permission. I had never done it. I hadn't seen it done, nor had I heard the telling of it being done. Most things, if I could see it, I could figure it out. If I listened to it direct, I remembered it. That's how I came to be an iron worker. White people that done what I done were called blacksmiths. But General Freely would get whipping mad if I called myself a blacksmith. He said I wasn't allowed no title. I was an iron worker and that was it. I didn't want no title. I had no use for something I'd never seen before. I simply wanted to be a blacksmith, like the white people that done what I done. Like Mr. Hans, the gentleman that came from across the big water who taught me the blacksmithing. The white people that brought me things to fix or to make said I was the best at the blacksmithing they ever knew. They never said that to me, but I'd hear them whispering. Most mornings they'd be wagons lined clear down to the big house drive, waiting for me to do my iron workings for them. And that's how I learned what I learned, watching and listening. It started when I was a big-eyed child. I was marveling and watching the world well before I got the running legs under me. Legs that didn't bother to look where they were going. They just went. Before dawn would come, the old steaming live oaks, waving their black moss and cradling rows of long living shacks, I'd get the hankering to hear Miss Carmen's Bible readings. Smoke drifting out of the morning oven fires and through the quarters, seemed to lift my head right out of the straw bed. I'd wiggle out from under Mama's arms into my breeches, sneak past Big Mama's oven to snatch a bread roll, and then I'd slip real quiet up to Miss Carmen and General Freely's big plantation house and under their back porch. That porch was grand. It was screened in with the cloth for the summertime, and it also had the swing-down windows for the winter. It was tall, so a person would have to climb the stairs to see inside. I would hide under the porch in the dark, right under the table, with my ear turned up and wait for the words to drift down. In the winter, it wasn't easy to hear the readings because the windows were drawn. I'd stand up with my shoulders forced against the big timber boards, my head cocked between them, and my ear tied against the floor so I could hear the readings. About the time my knees would go to aching from cold shakings, old Manny would show to start the fire. He'd bring a tray of tea, the soft sweet bread, the butter, and the jam, and then he'd stand there plumb still, waiting like a long-legged fishing bird until Miss Carmen showed. She'd start singing her readings while Manny served. I'd hold a corner of my bread roll in my mouth until it softened enough to chew, and Miss Carmen and I'd have breakfast together while she sang to me. The readings were not like the stories the papas would tell down at the quarters in the night. These stories were not lively and fun like the papas told, but there was something about them that was important. Mostly, I think it was the learning of the magic. Doing the reading wasn't allowed, so I hid and listened and remembered. Miss Carmen's readings were different than the papa's stories too, because her readings had the names and numbers in them that didn't make no sense at all. The first readings I ever heard Miss Carmen sing went like this. Matthew 25, verse 1. Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. Matthew 25, verse 2. And 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were prudent. Matthew 25, verse 3. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. Matthew 25, verse 4. But the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. It did seem silly that a person would take a lamp into the night and no oil. Of course, I didn't figure virgins must be too smart because I had never seen one, and I never heard one what was, so they must not have made it too long. I know these words were important because I could feel Miss Carmen stretch up tall like her voice as she sang the readings. She cast her warm, deep voice across the gardens like a full feathered quilt smothering a fevered black child. I felt as if I were part of the show, like the Saturday night parties the Fraleys held in the great parlor every week. Usually, there were people I had never seen before making the music or making a play or something real fancy. After that, Miss Carmen would sing with that warm, tingly voice that makes men frisky and their women people quiet and angry. General Freely didn't seem to care for it none neither, because after everyone would leave, they'd have a big old fuss. He was always going on about something being too fresh. I don't know what that fresh was, but the words Miss Carmen would sing out of that big black book of a morning didn't seem to have none of it. Matthew and his numbers didn't do the story no good neither. In fact, it slowed things down, so I was waiting on every word. That is how I came to learn those stories, because I had time to put them in a place I could remember them from. Her Bible stories came to me from memory. Matthew's words went into Matthew place in my mind. That is how it was with the John stories and the Leviticus stories and the 1 Corinthians stories. The little pieces of the named stories had a number, and that is how they ended up in my mind, all neat in their place, just waiting on me to recall the words. I was so busy trying to figure out where my life had come from, I didn't realize anyone was around until they were standing right in front of me. I leapt into the ditch before I had a thought of it. Slithering deep into the tall weaving reeds, it dawned on me that it was a small mama and a child that had sent me swimming in the swampy ditch waters. I stood. She was thin and frail, but made me feel manly and keen, like my old Missy had. Her hair was long, pulled back and tied in a dancing full tail. Her sparkling eyes and slight smile were glowing. She had a bit of a bounce, the kind that makes a man feel like he gave it to her. It made me feel guilty and sad, knowing I had put my Missy in the ground just this past Sunday. Her little girl pointed at me. There he is, Mama. Mama, see the papa? See the papa? He poked up right there in the cottontails. Mama, see him, Mama? Yes, baby. Come on now, she said as she tugged at her child. See the papa, Mama? Huh? The little girl kept pointing and waving. Uh-huh, let's be going on now, hon. I was ready to wave back at the child. I wanted to call out to the mother because she made me feel warm. Mama, how come he be hiding in the swamp looking at us like a big-eyed toad? She was a cute little one, and her mama had my mind all up in a toad until then. I paid that child some mind. I don't take to no disrespecting statements about a bona fide blacksmith now. A big-eyed toad. Standing up in my short breeches, in oozy, rotting swamp muck, nothing but my head poking out from between the weaving grasses, two orbs popping out like a big old bullfrog, stalking her mama like a tomcat on a banty hen, standing there, slowly settling, trying to think of something so fancy to say that it would entice this young beauty off the dry, smooth roadbed down to where we could gently sink into the rotten stench of seeping mire and hide from the world together. Mama set my life to the light. All the papas do that on the road, sweetie. She gave me a final glance and put her back to me. I seeped into the muck. That thin little mama and her baby were right. I was hiding. We were all hiding. When we were papered, a white man wouldn't beat another white man's Negro any more than he would beat that man's horse. They needed us healthy to do the work. Unless there was an example to be made, whippings weren't tolerated much. Beatings were how the bosses kept the work in the order, but whippings were only given at the direction of the owner, because a whipping would keep a man out of the field for a good time. In these new free days, there weren't any owners to keep the whippings away. The black man on the road was asking for a whipping. Our women folk didn't talk about what happened on the road. Sometimes their children would whisper about it. I heard the talk about blacksmith work in Savannah and had determined to go there someday. There wasn't anyone to tell me how to get there. Moses, the one Negro that used to drive General Fraley and his family down Savannah way, disappeared the night before General Fraley said we were free. The other Negroes from the plantation hadn't been past the end of the Freely drive no farther than me. When I asked General Fraley or the bosses how to get to Savannah, they would laugh and tell me to go ask the sign. When I went down to visit the sign, riders would show and chase me back to General Fraley's. On top of that, there was the road demons from hell that General Fraley and the bosses told us about. I was lucky I never saw one because they sounded worse than the riders. We were safe from the riders and the demons as long as we stayed on the plantation. General Fraley paid us in coins, and we would trade the coins down in the store at the end of his drive for corn or beans or bread. Once in a while, they let us trade for parts from the butchery, and we'd boil it into a stew with our beans and corn, and have a gathering that night that would last all night long sometimes. We were all getting thin. After the freedom came, my wife started growing smaller by the day. The white man that did the doctoring said she was suffering from the freedom blight, and lots of black folk had got ill from it because they didn't know how to take care of themselves without a proper master. I wondered if it was the food they were trading us for. It was not good like meat and vegetables we used to get. Oftentimes the corn was slimy. The beans were furry and white and clumped together. I think the freedom blight was caused by rotten food, but I couldn't say nothing, or I'd find myself living out on the road with the riders and the demons. Missy knelt on both knees before the moldy pile of fruit and vegetables, with her pointy finger plunged deep into the rotten flesh of a mushy potato. The brown, lumpy blob rooted up to her big knuckle, pointed in the direction of her wistful gaze. Under the flickering kerosene chandeliers on the white side of the store were neatly tiered shelves with rows of fresh peaches and plums, and apples, and pears, and watermelons, and muskmelon, and onion, and potatoes, and sweet potatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, and tomato, and lettuce, and celery, and bins of peanuts, and pecans, and walnuts, and such. They were shining and firm and glistened like waves dancing on a moonlit pond. Mr. Piper carefully polished a big green pepper. Feeling her intense gaze, he turned on my Missy and she lowered her eyes. "What you looking at, Negro? Ain't nothing round over here for no Negroes." He scooted over to the muskmelon and pulled one from the bottom of the neat stack. It was cracked open on one side. Brown spots covered the otherwise light green skin. Yellow slime dripped from the open wound as he carried it past the bright, clean aisles full of boxed and canned goods towards us. Stepping down into the Negro side of the store, thick dust exploded forward into the dark shadows. The melon rolled off his fingertips, plopping into the soft, moldy pile of fruits and vegetables, splattering greasy chunks across Missy's burlap skirt. The dripping rotten potato clinging to Missy's finger hung limp in the air as she brushed the mess on her lap. "You paying for that tater, you ruint now. You hear me, Negro?" Mr. Piper demanded. "Yes, sir, Mr. Piper, sir," I answered. "We just looking through them fine-looking vegetables for the best uns. Uh-huh. We sure be taking that tater too, Mr. Piper, sir." I helped Missy to her feet. "You getting proud on me, boy?" "No, sir, Mr. Piper, sir," my voice cracked. "I done been cured of assassin now, Mr. Piper, sir." The melon sunk deep into the soft, lumpy pile at her feet as we waited, expecting. The front door banged closed as Mrs. Carmen's voice echoed back into the dark cavern. "Charlie, Charlie, you round?" "Comin', Miss Carmen," Mr. Piper answered. Hopping up the step onto the rug, giving me a last hateful glare, he carefully wiped his feet before stepping onto the oil-baked floors. He tromped to the front counter where Miss Carmen's hat feathers danced above the neatly stocked shelves. "What can I get you, Miss Carmen?" "The General said you boys butchered yesterday." "Yes, yes. And how's General Fraley? I haven't seen him since y'all went down to Savannah way." "The General said you did up a steer and a few pigs." "Yes, ma'am. The General sent down a nice young steer and several well-fed hogs." "Let me see a top cut on that steer. Also a chop and pork belly from the best pig." "Yes, ma'am, Miss Carmen." Mr. Piper hurried through the cellar door. "I'll be right up." Miss Carmen's blue billowing dress exploded around the front row of shelves as she stepped into view. The long, puffy sleeves of her riding coat waved like opposing flags against her tight, white blouse. A bright red dangling bow tie made me look from her lady curves to her long neckline. Her beautiful red lips a beacon against white skin. A black top hat was tied with a long red scarf trailing off the back black rim, while a white plume of feathers swayed to one side, waving above her like a banner. Noticing me and Missy, the wife of our former master, turned away. We lowered our eyes and stepped through the rotting vegetables piled on the floor toward the back. Missy slowed at the bins where cans and boxes and jars and such were thrown in together. Most of it was dented or smashed or broken. Missy reached into the bin of cans with pictures on them, more fruits and vegetables, boxes with pictures of bread and soap and things that didn't make no sense. A big jar of pickled melon rind lay broken on top of the pile. Cans were covered in sticky, sugary syrup. Boxes were soaked through and wet. As Missy started to lift the soggy box, I quickly pulled her away. "What you's doing now?" she frowned, pulling back. I whispered, "They see you and's touched something in there, and they be seeing you done broke that melon jar. Then we be paying for that whole bin of stuff most of we can't even eat." Our lips clenched and we covered our noses as we moved towards the butchering table. It smelled like curdled swamp water. The thick, heavy chopping table was covered in animal guts and brains and hooves and tongue and livers and heart and old chunks of meat and fat. The gray pile moved like it was crawling off the table as it jiggled under a mat of flies burrowing through it. A long, lone knife stood, stabbed into the table. A fly crawled up its bloody edge. Missy's lips curled, her eyes glazed as they moved over the mass of stinking flesh, the rotting vegetables soaking into the floor, the broken and smashed goods, and burlap bags of moldy beans and corn. What's we be eatin' from round here, Suki? Lazy coyote dog don't find no eatin's in him. The cellar door banged open as Mr. Piper wrestled his way through with an armload of bright white paper packages. Unwrapping them, he held meat up for Miss Carmen. Light glowed from the bright white fatty edges of the cut. Dark red meat dotted with little white spots appeared to leap from the fatty circle. This is prime cut, very good steer, this'n. Interrupting, Miss Carmen said, the marbling is perfect. The fat's so thick on the edges, you'd think it was a good fat hog. Oh, y'all should see the pork, Mr. Piper declared, as he placed the cut back in the paper and pulled out a big, thick pork chop and a giant slab of pork belly. The brilliant white slab speckled with red, meaty spots. Oh my, Miss Carmen declared. That's one well-fed piggy. Mr. Piper beamed as Miss Carmen continued. Cut half that steer up for me and that fat piggy right there and send it up to the house. Yes, ma'am. You can sell the rest. I just pulled some sausages and ham out in the smoker this morning. Oh, breakfast sausages? Pork breakfast sausages and the beef summer sausages. Big ones, like the big round ones y'all do sometimes? 10 pounds. Oh, yes, send me a dozen of each. Throw some of them hams in there, too. A dozen? Maybe just a few. She turned and flowed toward the door, calling over her shoulder. That's lunch for them house Negroes. They don't eat much. Missy's lips were still curled, but light shined from her eyes as they settled on the bundles of cloth stacked by the painting counter. Bright, flowery cloth patterns, blues and reds and yellows. Glancing down, she wiped at the dark spots on her faded burlap skirt. I was hoping more every day that I could find a way to Savannah, maybe trade for better food and some cloth Missy would be proud to be seen in. Savannah was rows of beautifully pillared white homes, framed by perfectly groomed towering oaks and long, straight cobbled street filled with perfectly dressed Negro folk, strolling elegantly up and down the roadways. Those big, beautiful porches were filled with my folk, eating from grand, fresh trays of fruit and pastries and treats, and tall glasses of cold, fresh drinks, and smoking long, thin carved pipes, and smiling and singing. I knew how good Savannah was because Moses would take our masters down there so General Fraley could sit on them fancy courts with them lords and the king and such things. Moses didn't hardly speak to us plantation Negroes, but he would sure come down to the quarters after one of his trips and tell us how grand Savannah was, how the lords and the princesses and the king did their courts and their balls, how Savannah Negroes was as good as free, how the Savannah Negroes lived in big houses like the Fraleys, and every street was full of big houses and cobbled like the drive up to Fraley's big house. It was as heavenly as a man could imagine, except a Negro would die trying to get there. I spent most of my days sweating over hot iron, pounding it into shape, dreaming of Savannah, knowing it was right down the road. Working as General Fraley's blacksmith didn't sit with me, but getting caught on the road was a sure way to end up whipped and hooved and left rotting in the ditch. All the papas do that on the road, sweetie? That little mama's words echoed as that timber-sized arrow lunged me good. Again. The fear in me was healthy. It was a beast. I didn't have a master, I had they. They owned me with their fear. I could hear the pounding in my chest, in my heart, and suddenly in my ears. The billowing cloud rushing towards me was the sound of hooves, rising like hail-filled thunderheads. Running like tears through my soul, my brow poured, clammy and cold, as the demon reached, clawing, pulling me to it. Fear was coming. End of chapter 3. How are you guys holding up? Anybody need to pee? Chapter 4. From the horizon, nodding hats and heads rose, then rocking shoulders. The rhythmic bob of horse heads followed. Sweaty, rippling, pounding chest came, and finally the flesh-cleaving hooves splashed rhythmically through the shimmering heat. The hooves beat the foundation of my mind, shredding flesh and shattering bones with every strike. Heavy with fear, feet buried in the muck and the mire of the slavery of my withering spirit, a free man's courage to run escaped me. Like an invading army, they came full abreast the road. Their ranks disappeared deep in the climbing dust. The mass seethed like a boiling tornado, determined to catch the runaway slave and the murdering Negro-loving Union soldier. Head and eyes turning in unison, scanning the land, searching for someone to blame the freedom war on. The ferocity of their black souls shattered the slavery freezing my mind as I spun, diving deep into the thick reeds and dark water. Turning, my eye caught the stark, thin willow of the little mama and her child. Perched on the raised roadbed, she sprouted up from the barren land like a lone, spiny palmetto. With her head and eyes down, the riders rumbled upon her. The little mama said something to give her child a tug, as if to say, "This is bad, be quiet." As words rose in my throat, my swollen heart choked breath out of me. Like a wide-eyed bullfrog, I stared at the little mama and her child. Slowly crouching into the swampy muck, my bottom settled into the cool black water, soothing my panic. My shackled mind focused as I slowly pushed aside the reeds. Stepping back into the edge of the ditch, the mob came upon her. Riders covered the road from edge to edge. The young woman and her little girl stood head down, staring at their feet. As the mob milled, pressing upon them, they stumbled and slid, floundering backwards into the swampy ditch. Mama pulled her baby up from the muck, and the little girl clung to her as they stood shaking before the angry mob, trying to disappear with nowhere to hide. Spying General Fraley, my heart jumped into my throat. His great stallion pushed through the milling horsemen as he sat, calmly, quietly, before the young woman. Mr. Collard, General Fraley's head man, rose up beside him and scowled down upon her. Bullwhip coiled in hand, resting on his thigh, the mob slowly settled as the pair stared quietly, bitterly, down upon the mama and her baby. General Fraley said something to the woman. Turning towards each other, he and Mr. Collard laughed. Their chuckle stopped suddenly, twisting into a sneer. She never raised her head, standing quietly as General Fraley yelled at her. She stood there, like me, slowly oozing into the muck. He got quiet, staring at her. Then he said something and turned that big stallion in my direction. Mr. Collard sat on his horse, staring at the little mama, quiet. General Fraley came on. Mr. Collard let the coil of his big long bullwhip go. It roiled, snake-like, to the ground. He jerked the handle back, and the long braided leather whip began its dancing, twisting, turning spin into the air behind. He leaned out to let his rage fly, gnashing, ripping, and tearing flesh from a young helpless woman and her child, purely for the hatred of it. Wailing and lunging out of the muck, I charged up onto the road as the whip started down, my lungs curdling, throat rattling, my eyes burst out of my head. "I am here! I am here!" My howls filling the barren sky. Mr. Collard jerked toward me, and the arcing whip died midair, flopping harmlessly to the ground. In a full gallop, with his face twisted up and screaming, General Fraley led the boiling, charging mob. "Hey, Negro, you stay right there. Right there, Negro. Don't you move. Don't you go nowhere." As General Fraley, swinging and flailing the air with his crop, and the enraged mob charged, the sign spoke to me. A whisper rose up from the bottom of my soul. In a calmness utterly oblivious to the dark, violent chaos roaring down upon me, the sign murmured, "Turn, look, your first horizon, bending itself, bending my will, stretching a board outward and pointing, go to it. At my back, with his hangman's noose wrapped around my soul, General Fraley pulled and tugged at my enslaved mind. He bellowed, "Don't you dare move, boy!" Reasoning, I had done nothing. I didn't kill the storekeeper. I'll be safe. You move 1 inch, Negro, and you'll get the beating of your life. General Fraley's voice raged above the mob's screams. I'm innocent. I'm a good man. They won't blame me. And there he was on his giant stallion, charging me from the rear, yet standing in front of me at the same time, beating me back with my own mind, begging with his best man, fear, to stop, to kill my momentum, to smother my last human will. Again. 1 inch, boy, and it'll be the last of you. Be obedient. Everything will be okay. I ran. End of chapter 4 in tonight's reading. Thank you.
I'm curious.
Yes.
What, if any, kind of research did you do to write this? Because being from, I don't know if you're originally from Montana, but your story about how this came to you was interesting. And then I'm also curious if you've gotten, I mean, it's remarkable. I can't wait to read more. But I'm curious if you've gotten any pushback from anyone.
I've not gotten any pushback. Going to the end, I guess you'll understand. But I read a lot of Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou. There you go. I was like, that isn't right. That's why I was staring up at the fan going, what is her name again? But I did quite a bit of research, just reading and trying to understand. As far as historical fact, it's really a story set in a very close, closed environment. Mm-hmm. And there are props in here that I did research fairly well and made sure that they were appropriate for the time and place. But as far as it being a historical novel, I probably would not call it that, other than it is based upon a time in history. I was born in Hamilton.
Okay.
And I remember growing up in Montana and Wyoming, the number of black people that I saw in my life in Montana, I could probably count on one hand.
Yeah.
And most of them were at 7-Eleven next to the interstate. So yeah, and then I went in the Army, and I'm suddenly a minority. And many of my great friends were people of color, many different shades of color. And that's one reason that story. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm curious if you had any friends or anyone who's read it who is a person of color, and what their thoughts are on. I mean, it really is captivating, and I honestly can't wait to read the whole thing. It's very well written. I'm just curious if, because of the sensitivity of a white person writing it, if you had any people of color read it and what their thoughts were.
The questions, and I guess push back, if you will, on that about a white person writing it is, it's not a book for black people.
No, but it's
the
perspective of a black person.
Right, it is.
And that is, I think it's a great story. I mean, I could listen to more and more. I'm just curious of the position of being a white person, writing about a person of color, and writing from their perspective, not not just about a person of color,
No,
but from the perspective.
that's a very good question. I have been asked that. I have had several friends who are black, and one of them is from South Africa.
Oh,
And is
interesting. Okay.
very, still,
Right.
still very much
Right.
living this.
Right.
And grew up there, so he remembers apartheid. So. And I've never had them ask me that. I've had white people ask me that. I haven't had a lot of comment from the other two black people I know together. But Mokai and I have talked about it a lot. Mokai is the person from South Africa.
Okay.
And none of them had had that problem with a white person, especially if they'd read it. Yeah, there's certainly that. That's a very good question and concern.
This, it's not really a concern. I mean, the story itself.
Well,
is,
concern's probably not the right word,
But
yeah.
the story itself is wonderful and engaging, and I just was curious because of, especially the time that we're living in right now, where we are learning, and we're more cognizant of writing a story from the perspective that we couldn't possibly really understand.
Exactly.
Not that that's coloring the story at all, because it is a really good story. I just was curious if anyone had given you any sort of.
Yeah, and I'm actually very glad you brought that up, because there is a foreword to
Okay.
this that explains quite a bit.
Okay.
It is now the afterword.
Oh, interesting.
Because I felt that the foreword puts it into racial tones,
Okay.
and it might put people off from reading it, when I think the story is the important thing, because it's a parable, is the way I look at it. And so I moved the forward to an afterward to explain that, where it came from, and what it's about, and perspective, and et cetera. So I was going to address something you said, and now I forgot. That it was about moving it from the front to the back. But there's also, I talk about the cover. And, oh, that's what I was going to say, is what I learned about this book was about me.
Interesting.
I learned more about me in my, I think I was 58 or something like that when I wrote it. But I learned more about me in my 58 years than I had in my entire 50 years before that.
Interesting.
And I learned about prejudices that I and we all carry, but don't realize or recognize.
Right.
But this cover, I kind of believe things work out the way they're supposed to. And I had a guy lined up, I had shot this is my picture. So I had a guy lined up to do it. And when it came down to the day that we were gonna photograph it, he didn't show. So I decided to go skiing, which is unusual.
Sure.
So I'm going skiing, and he walks across the street in front of me on not Park Street, Harrison. And I just about wrecked and crashed every car on the street, trying to get spun around, turn around and chase him back down. And shooting this cover taught me a lot too, because it turned out in the actual print darker than it should be. But I will tell you this, and this is in the afterword. I have been photographing him. Another friend of mine is the giant ham. And we've been photographing for about an hour and decided to take a break. And I've been telling Andrew how to move, what to do with his eyes. I was playing that director, photographer role, right? And he went out to have a smoke. And my friend Jack said to me, basically, I think you're giving him too much direction. Why don't you let him be him? And I thought about that, and you know that arrow that strikes like a barn timber? Struck me in my own studio. And I was like, here's a white guy behind the camera telling a black man how to move in every way. And it was a huge epiphany. And is it ironic? I don't know. But it really hit me kind of hard right then. And he came back in and we just talked, and we talked about his life and experiences he had, he lives in Butte, and about his experiences in Butte too, and how prejudiced we are, even though we don't really think we are. But he says, you know, it's like everywhere he goes, every eye follows him, and we don't do that to each other.
I love the cover. Did you have that in mind? Like, did it coalesce the same time you thought of this parable of the shackles of the mind? Did that cover just come at the same time? Because it's so perfect with what the story is.
I don't remember what stage of the writing was that image came to me, but it was not right at the beginning.
Okay.
I had been writing for a little while. I do remember that. Yeah. So,
Interesting.
I have a couple questions.
yeah.
Your prose is so beautiful.
Oh, well,
And
thank you.
Yeah. Getting into the story, did your parents read to you when you were little? And what were
No.
their favorite books?
They did not,
No.
but I read voraciously. I grew up on a ranch, and I spent a lot of time by myself. And when I was irrigating on a ditch, I had a book with me. And when I was riding a horse, riding cows, I had a book with me. And yeah, I just read voraciously. And I didn't care what it was. I read all the time. And thank you, that means a lot.
So the second question kind of is related to that. If you've read a lot, there's something about this story that reminds me of a Greek myth or an Odyssey of sorts. There's a lot of great stories, but journey is only beginning for this man who's on
Right.
his way to Savannah,
Yes.
right? Hollywood these days, I think somebody said to me, who's a person of color, America's not ready for a story where somebody makes their own way, a person of color makes their own way. They always have a white savior in the story. And I think that's really interesting. Like, maybe we're getting there. And so we started talking about which movies we've watched that like Black Panther, white savior, you know, the jet guy comes in and teaches them how to fly, right? And so when you're reading in this chapter 2, when the Union General, is that a white savior-ish figure, or because he's choosing to follow his own way, it's finally an illumination that maybe a black person looking at white people, not everybody has to be evil.
That is a good
I
point,
love
because
that.
he didn't follow him to Macon, he went to Savannah on his own.
Mhm.
And it might have been easier for him to go to Macon with the blue man. Interesting, yes.
So the book is full of metaphors. Every character, every place, and the horse is a huge metaphor. They're woven deeply throughout it. And it ends not with a white savior. A white person is involved. But I chose that ending very specifically because they're both discriminated against heavily. Is all I will say about the ending.
Hmm.
But I love that. Yeah, that there's always the white savior. Yeah.
Have you read Charles Johnson, The Underground Railroad?
I did. Yeah. After I wrote this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I like his writing. A lot. Yeah. You had another question. I think you had a couple, and I didn't answer.
It's more about books you've read. I can talk
Oh.
about it later.
Well, they're good questions. Ask them, they're good questions.
I was just gonna say, there was parts of it when you were talking that, like even when you said he was in the swamp, you could almost smell the
Yeah.
dirty water. The way
Yeah.
your words
Thank you.
described it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There was times like the dust from the horse, it was like you could almost, and I think the wind blew in at the same time, which was kind of goosebumpy to me. When you were talking about that, I'm like, of course, that happened. But you could almost smell the dust, and you could smell that swampy water, just the way you described it, scooching down and being, covered. It was very, very, your imagination could go a lot of different ways with it. It was very well described, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, very good.
I hope it's well balanced in that aspect because I'm currently listening to the Lord of the Rings because of it's so well produced. It's being read. It's an audiobook, and I'm getting ready to turn this into an audiobook.
Oh, I was just gonna ask you that.
So I'm listening for some coaching through the Lord of the Rings. And I read the Lord of the Rings, I don't know how many times, The Hobbit and the three following books through childhood into, I probably read it 5 or 6 years ago too. But the detail, as I'm listening to it, can just wear you thin. Even though they're great, great stories. And I've been very conscious about trying to be descriptive and have the reader feel the story, but at the same time keep it moving along so that you're not like, okay, the color of the tablecloth probably isn't valid unless somebody died on it. That kind of thing. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
But-
it was descriptive enough for my mind to imagine what that swamp looked like without you actually telling me what the swamp looked like. An audiobook would be great because I can't physically really hold a book anymore, so I'm like, if this was an audiobook, this would be great.
Yeah.
I would listen to it over and over, yeah.
This is my third book. The first one was almost 800 pages. The second one was a little over 400 pages. This one is 240 something. So you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
I learned over time to get rid of the fluff and keep the story going. And
Well, I mean, even some of our classics, Faulkner and don't go on so much, and they're considered genius, so
yes,
it's okay.
very much so. that was also at a different time when people did not have television and radio.
I see. Yep, I see.
And I think and books were very rare and very expensive. So I think people wanted to spend more time reveling in the story and getting a full imagination. And travel was really, really expensive. So I think that description in those times, people didn't know what Mexico was about. So if you were telling a story about Mexico, it was important to have those extra details. And even, like I lived in South Carolina for 3 years, and I kid you not, there was a lady that lived down the road from me, 3 or 4 houses, who had not left the county, and she was in her 70s. Had never left the county in her 70s, and the South is thick with them. So there's people even in the States that don't, understand the environment of what's across the county line or the state line. But
Is that where you picked up a lot of, now this is the hardest word for me ever to say ever, colloquialisms. But is that where
I'll
you
join
picked
you
a
with
lot,
that.
right? Is that where
Yeah.
you picked a lot of that? Because I was raised in the Southeast, and so a lot of that, the accent or the affectation or the white people, and instead of a white person, white people in a singular use, sounds familiar. And so is that where you picked some of that up? Was your experience in South Carolina?
I picked up a lot of it from the Army,
Okay.
and there were a lot of different accents in the Army, white and people of all color. But that was a little bit of my first exposure to many different black accents. Then when I was in college, I have a marketing degree, and I came home one day and my roommate said to me, I grew up on a ranch and in the construction business and all that. You do manly things. And I came home one night, my roommate, who we both were in the Army together in Germany, and went to MSU together, and roommates there, he came home and he said, hey, I signed up, I'm gonna go to the South and sell books door to door for the summer. And I about laughed myself right out of the freaking apartment. I thought that was cute, if you will. Then I thought about it for a couple of days and I was like, I will never get a better marketing experience in my life than if I go to Montgomery, Alabama and sell books there. So I did. And I ended up, I did not like, in the same experience when I ended up in South Carolina for 3 years, I did not care for the white neighborhoods. And I ended up in the projects selling books. And I had a lot of really wonderful, memorable experiences in the projects. And that was a big thing. But then when I went to South Carolina, it was probably a little more white, insulated, because we were upper middle class white people, but I did have a lot of black friends that I preferred to hang out with in South Carolina.
What were the best sellers door to door?
What's that?
What were the best sellers door to door?
Well, we sold a condensed encyclopedia. Is
I was
what it
gonna say,
was.
that would be encyclopedia.
Like they were 3 books about this thick, and so that's what we sold. Yeah, I could tell you pretty much what every experience was going and knocking on a door though. I'd go knock on a door and this little child would come running to the door. You could hear him running down the steps, the hallway. They'd get to the door all excited, right? And they'd open the door and there's a white dude. And they would go, and they'd shut the door, and they'd turn around, and you hear them running back down the hall. Mama, mama, they white boy at the door. They white boy at the door, mama. And then Mom would come to the door. She would open the door. Yeah. And a head would pop up on this side of the leg, and this side of the leg, over the shoulder, and over the shoulder, and between the legs. And pretty soon there'd be 8 faces staring at you around Mom. But most of them bought books. Because they really wanted their children educated. And I learned a lot about this, and about part of this is about this man realized that his only way to freedom was through getting educated. Was being able to live with the white man on equal terms. And I learned that in the projects from people buying books from me. I would walk up a driveway and I would see a car parked there, and there was hardly any rubber left on the tires. You could see the steel belts on all 4 tires, and you would see broken windows, and just everything was worn out. And they would buy these books, and they wanted their kids to get out of that. They couldn't afford new tires, and they couldn't afford $129 for these encyclopedias. But by the end of the summer, when the books got delivered, they had their $129. They, of all the white neighborhoods, people take education for granted. It's what we do. We get educated. So what? There in the projects, it is valued highly. And what was I gonna say about that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Jim.
thank you.
I'm going to be the filter so that you can purchase your book and then have time with Jim to have him sign it for you, and then you can chat with him a little bit. So I invite you over.
There's a card in every book, and there's also cards if you just want to get a card, if you want to contact me later.
And he has Venmo and cash, and I wrote a check, so hopefully you're taking checks.
Yes, yep. Yep. And you can order it on Amazon if you want.
My assistants? I know, when she's there for a while. Yeah. Did you see it? He has Venmo or cash or check. That's not card. And then there's the paperback is 20 and the hardback is 25, which I don't know how many more hardbacks there are, but I would go for that because that's a stream of
I think I only have 4 right now.
Oh, well, and I bought 2, and so there's 2 left. So oh, perfect, wonderful, thank you.
Okay,
Jim. Yes, one for myself.
Oh, awesome.
This was absolutely delightful. You are not only a wonderful writer, so descriptive, but you're a great storyteller. You're relating all of your personal experiences. It's amazing. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I just kind of wondered, I didn't have an opportunity to ask my sister, but
Oh,
I thought they were really
is that right? Oh.
trying to arrange that it
Oh, okay.
like this can happen. How do you feel about that?
I know, my hands don't work anymore.
I don't even know where to start.
Right. Don't get me
Don't know
started.
where to start. I had the same conversation with a guy on the phone today. We had a film, a guy working on a Netflix job. He took a LiDAR, a radar cam. They just shut the museum down in Philadelphia. He went in with his camera their structure, so that it can be recreated in Trump.
Oh, how amazing, what a great story.
So I'm just hoping to survive into life after Trump.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
So,
Aren't we all?
You guys come to the house when you're done reading that, and we'll have coffee. Seriously. Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
Does he have more? Jen, do you have more hardcovers?
I do not.
Oh.
If you really want one, they're on Amazon for $25.
I can switch out.
Sent some back.
Oh, I'm not taking paperback, I can barely lift that to read, I can't hold a hardcover, yes, I will read that, it's a big deal.
Okay. And I'm sure that I could send in mail and chat, I'm sure that would be okay. You've got enough people figured it out for you.
We know where
Should
We know where you live. Yeah, go find her.
Pretty shifty.
I don't really, but see, I don't do, I've refused to do that, I'm like, you can't.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing the experience.
Is that somebody's going first there?
Yeah, that's what I took.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that.
I counted $11.
Looking forward to this check.
I didn't realize you didn't have money, I didn't even pay for yours.
Okay, so 20?
I thought you were just trying to practice Venmo. I thought you were just trying to practice Venmo, I couldn't.
It's in that little tray at the end of the far table.
Oh, okay. To me, Venmo's easier than PayPal.
No, all the way at the end of the, oh,
It's the only one I've done, and I'm not learning anything new.
I'm
All
saying
I do is feel
Did it?
electronic.
well, thanks for the book.
Oh, you're welcome. I really am anxious to,
Here's the rest of the story.
yeah, unless you want. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pockets
Yes,
are
I
almost
think I'll be remembered. And I want it to be wrong, this is gonna be $1 million book. It's part of my inheritance. All right, my dear, thank you for coming. I need it.
Hi, I miss you. Let's go kayak. Yeah.
Pick a day.
Yeah, seriously, pick a day.
Let's pick a day and write it down, because if not, I
Nice
can,
hot
I
weather,
wander
find
off
a
and do
calm
other jobs,
afternoon.
so. Some morning, yeah, or evening, let's figure it out.
Oh, I would love it.
Yeah, well, I'll.
Where are you going?
Georgetown, probably, Red Dead News Marina.
Oh, they've been fun.
Some of us have, I have a kayak, but some of us don't, so we can all rent from there.
Yeah, I've been out on the Warm Springs Pond a few times.
Oh, yeah?
Big Hole, Storm Lake too.
I had texted him because.
Did you drive all the way up to the top of the storm?
With the kayak?
Oh,
very
okay.
nice.
I saw somebody had a camper up there once, and I don't know how.
I told him I was
brave.
I've seen a few cars up there.
Well, yeah, yeah, I would be busted a gas tank or axle, and that's how you do it. The benzene was tough. One year I rode an electric bike from the bottom parking lot all the way to the top. Back, I still got scars on my legs from falling off and cutting myself. Dawn was, well, you know, typical. Dawn was way worse. I'm like, wait for me. Boom. The bike was too big. The bike was too big.
Is it a mountain bike?
It was an electric mountain bike, yeah. Yeah, we rented it from Canada bicycle or something.
doing a hot dog.
Yeah.
Because I thought a pie eating contest might be fun. And I was like, well, in the summertime, masters of July, do a hot dog eating contest. And
I think it came out 2 or 3 years ago, but it's a true story of, who is half, well, her dad was her plantation, but she was a slave.
Yes, yes. And she should have, one of the things that really, really.
Her husband, in the slave times, was very, very dark. So she dressed up, and she was a house slave, as a dog, a half daughter of slavery. So she was taught people right. And she dressed up as a man and took her husband, who was a slave, on a train.
I mean, we all talk a lot about.
It's a true
that.
story.
That's a good one.
It is really good. And then, after they got to Boston, like to Providence and
set up a
Boston,
system.
they were swept into the whole suffragette movement, and they were taken almost as tokens for women to show off that now they're gonna tell the story.
It's up there.
Well,
There's a committee for
But they didn't
that,
have
but they're looking
It
for
was a great
more
story.
people, and so I was looking at
So
it closer.
they moved to
wait a
freedom
minute.
before
This
emancipation.
committee, remember the
They
deal
were-
things?
So they escaped to the north
And this
just
committee's
before.
take a year.
But they're not even.
Yeah, you know, it's
There's
scary.
positions, and one of the both of them you have to have like,
And quite a few
either.
slaves made it to
business
the
owner,
north.
and the other one you have to.
And then they
be
passed that law where,
And I was like,
oh yeah, there's no
Yeah.
slavery.
They made it very.
But if you're caught
Yeah.
and sent back, yes, that was the time, that was the
Yeah.
risky time.
They don't say
Yeah.
that, we.
Yeah,
And the public
yeah.
health
So she pretended she had some kind of sword.
you know, or if you have a flyer that comes running to our voice, or.
There's a lot of people that.
What's the
There
rule?
won't be.
It's master slave.
Do you watch, do you see what happens?
Don't
Have you
put
read
my
it?
phone over there on a stand. I'll put it in my phone.
But I love those.
It was